me tell you a little bit about barnstorming quickly,
Yes,
because
yes.
people are, I don't maybe know what that is or why that's important, or really how foreign it is a concept when you talk about league play every single day, as we have it today. Um, Barnstorming was a necessity for Negro League teams because it was an opportunity to make money outside of their league, or that's where they came from. Because independent black baseball teams would travel all around Barnstorm before the league even happened in 1920. There were several other leagues attempted before that, but in general, what you had was the Kansas City Monarchs. You had one stadium in Kansas City to play at. It was controlled by the Kansas City Blues, the minor league team. Uh, by the time April came out and there was a schedule made up of how many dates there were going to be at the Stadium Association Park or Mulebach Stadium or wherever it was in Kansas City, um, the minor league team took all the dates. And then the Negro League teams would have to come in afterwards and decide which dates they wanted to have. Um, it was completely afterwards. And so it was all done in a real hurried fashion at the end of the spring when the Negro League teams, the only time they could have an opportunity to know what their schedule was going to be was relatively short period of time. It wasn't like it was printed the year before
Hmm.
and then everybody bought their tickets for the 4th of July a year in
Right.
advance. That's just not the way it was. And so they were constantly playing behind because they didn't really know what those dates were going to be, which necessitated this need for barnstorming, and something that they always did. And league games in the 1920 Negro National League season were played between Thursday and Sunday, giving you the rest of the week to be able to do something else, travel between places, and necessitated barnstorming. You could pick up a little extra cash. People would, and you could build your brand and your name recognition. And players like John Donaldson took huge advantage of this because he was famous in places where they didn't have major leagues. And so John Donaldson's name and reputation was much built on barnstorming because that's what he could do in the 19 teens.
Hmm.
1910s when that was the only thing they could really do. And so John Donaldson and barnstorming becomes a part of black baseball history because those guys are always stopping at a town in between the Negro League cities, stopping at many
Hmm.
different towns in between to play almost anywhere, anytime, in any conditions, to
Right.
pick up extra money for their ball clubs.
And I think it's such an overlooked, not just about the Negro Leagues, but such an overlooked aspect to the building of the brand, like you just said. M- Major League Baseball benefited, I think, uh, from the barnstorming that the Negro Leagues did, because this was before television, this was before radio in most places.
Oh, yeah, very.
Most places in the United States in 1920 and all the way up, probably World War II and maybe in some places beyond, they, they were inaccessible to people to go to see a major league game. If you were in some of these places, you just couldn't travel like you can today. I mean, I literally can drive a couple of hours and I could go see a half a dozen or more significant level minor league teams. I can go see the Texas Rangers, Houston Astros. It's not even that far, even if I wanted to drive to some other places, right? So when I was in Pennsylvania, it was even better because I was a couple of hours from Boston, New York,
Anyway, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh, everywhere, right? I mean, so that's what wasn't there. So baseball's brand was built by these teams traveling, and they never got to see a major league or that caliber of team. So what bothers me, and as we've talked about with these barnstorming, is people take that aspect of it and they say, well, the Negro Leagues only played against the local firehouse team.
Uh-huh.
Well, they did, but the significance of that is out of context to these.
Totally.
Yeah, and so
Well, John Donaldson brought major league quality to places where there were no major leaguers.
yeah, and they
And
wanted
so
they
a lot
wanted
of people
paint.
tell me, John Donaldson would be a much better Hall of Fame candidate if he had played against more major leaguers. Well, the places where John Donaldson was, there were no major leaguers, and
No,
there were
not
never
not
going to
not for
be any major
500 for
leaguers.
500 miles probably,
Right,
right?
right, right. And it wasn't like there was a major leaguer, you know, hiding behind the hay bales in the
Right.
middle of Nebraska somewhere, right? I mean, that just wasn't, I mean, that's illogical.
Yes.
But it's a place where many people go to in terms of a line of logic to try and explain or not explain the significance of Negro leaguers, or not have to take the significant step to be able to actually have some facts and knowledge of the
Right.
situation. What's been passed down to you and handed down and really cookie cuttered for us isn't the whole story.
No. And the other thing too that dawned on me the other day when I was just doing a little bit of digging was, obviously now Jackie Robinson comes along, the color line is gone, and now all of these players are a pipeline into the major leagues, and that became uh, faster and faster as the years went by and more players came in. Which to me, baseball is the ultimate cause and effect game, right? And so if the cause of the Negro Leaguers going into the major leagues, the effect of that was now obviously the talent in the Negro Leagues is going down. So what ended up happening, right? And you could probably touch on this better than I can because I don't really know a lot about it, but I do remember these teams as a kid. The Negro Leagues now they resorted in some cases to this barnstorming circuit with gimmicks and teams who sometimes were more show than they were. The baseball was good, don't get me wrong, but we've all seen the film of Goose Curry, slapping around at first base, and they had the Zulu Cannibal, Giants and crazy teams, right? And that's another misconception. Now, people who may have remembered some of these Negro League teams now have that in their brain that
Sure.
somehow it was just like a joke, a vaudeville act, and it wasn't. It became that to some degree, and it's disappointing that I've talked to a lot of people who that's how they viewed it.
Well, I mean, it's also important to understand that baseball thrived because these major league quality players were coming to places where there weren't any major leaguers, but they also sustained the town's ability to be able to have baseball in their town.
Yep.
And many teams still, even to this day, operate themselves into the red, right? They're in the negative. End of the year comes around, they pass the hat around. There's just not enough money to be able to sustain baseball, to pay the umpires and all the things that are associated with baseball games. But when John Donaldson would come to your town, uh, you could be operating in the red, and then you'd end up with a huge profit, and then you were able to sustain baseball for another year in your town because, like the wind, it changed every day. And so that was really a part of what John Donaldson's legacy needs to be, is he
Mm-hmm.
sustained baseball in places where baseball wasn't going to survive, because John Donaldson, the famous John Donaldson, would come to their town, and then baseball in general benefited from that.